The only thing that terrorized me in my childhood almost as much as the arcs that shall not be named. Yes, we're talking about training arcs. Even if I so much as smell the training arcs anywhere in the vicinity, I was an unhappy little bastard. I always viewed them as a necessity to the series, because without training, I would find myself complaining about it makes no sense that the good guy is so much more powerful now than he was last arc. Over the Water 7 arc, Luffy unlocked Gear 2nd and 3rd without even training in between. So to an extent, while I loved it, obviously, and it was amazing, I did kind of feel slighted. Despite this, in my time growing up with anime, even though I understood the value of training arcs, they were just so damn boring. If the fight scene was finally eating the chocolate cake, then the training arcs were the toothbrushing of the series. Toothbrushing is by no means fun, but let that not be the takeaway here. Brushing your teeth is the unpleasant necessity required to maintaining said teeth in order to eat the chocolate cake, which is the fight scene, where toothbrushing is the training. Yeah, definitely one of my weirder metaphors to get the point across, but the point was gotten across nonetheless, despite teeter-tottering on the narrow bridge between brilliance and cringe. But any hootamalooter, examples of this: hyperbolic time chain, toothbrushing; Rasen Shuriken train, toothbrushing; Ichigo running on a treadmill for 4 days straight, toothbrushing; training before the Fairy Tail Grand Magic Games; freaking root canal. Look, it's not that any of these training farts had a lot wrong with them. In fact, they were all good as far as training arcs go. But no one in their right mind would even dream to compare them to the fight that was getting hyped during said arc. Compared to actually fighting Cell, the hyperbolic time chamber was more boring than watching paint dry. Compared to Naruto vs. Pain, the Rasen Shuriken training was more boring than Alfheim Online's fairy dance on a 10-hour loop. And compared to any of Ichigo's major battles in Hueco Mundo, running on a treadmill for 4 days straight while getting yelled at by Lolly Tsundere Toga, it was pretty hilarious, but it was not all that mind-blowing nonetheless. And I know there's the unspoken anime YouTuber rule that you're not allowed to praise Fairy Tail, but the Grand Magic Games were freaking awesome, especially in comparison to the root canal before it. Well, I think I got my point across by now. And here's where I'm going to end this beginning segment. So, time to contrast your average shonen training arc to 2 anime that make the training arcs as quality as the clear progression threat arcs of the series, and how they are 2 completely different ways to do so. In fact, as far as my research goes, they are the only 2 ways to do so. Now, these aren't the only 2 series that actually accomplish this, but in recent memory, they're the only ones that do this well, and actually touch on both methods that I came to my conclusion exist. The first being in My Hero Academia, and the second being in the 7 Deadly Sins. So let's do this, fam! Originally, this was supposed to be one video covering both topics, but it ended up way too freaking long, so instead, I split it up into 2 videos, uploading both of them on the same day at the same time. This one will be 7 Deadly Sins, the other one is Hero Academia. Link in the description as well as at the end of the video. Enjoy. The 7 Deadly Sins is the most character-driven adventure setting of almost any shonen I've ever seen, which is very much the opposite of My Hero Academia being a society-focused training setting. Needless to say, a training arc would likely destroy the 7 Deadly Sins series if done blandly. And this, of course, is unless the training arc had a massive ulterior motive. That's the second way to do a training arc right, not in a training setting. And thankfully, the 7 Deadly Sins had a big one. Nearing the war arc in Naruto Shippuden, our boy Naruto went through some extraneous training to get his full power in check and ready himself for the war to come. As I've mentioned in my introduction in regard to One Piece, training arcs are crucial, or it just feels fake when the main character pops his newest ability out of his tuchus when he's in danger and whatnot. But in that training arc with B, which, no offense Naruto fanbase, I thought it was a pretty meh arc, because even though it needed to happen in some shape or form, it did not have this ulterior motive that I will be talking about in regards to the 7 Deadly Sins. We didn't particularly broaden our horizons, not in the endless depth of Naruto's character, and it's not like we understand him any better at all either. He went from a dude who couldn't harness his immense power to a dude who could harness his immense power. That was the purpose of the training arc, and that's really all that happened. That and of course, the really forced symbolism at hugging himself by the waterfall that was almost cringe. Not to
mention the fact that it took like 25 episodes.
In the 7 Deadly Sins, our whole training arc that I'll be talking about was essentially 2 episodes, and it had a massive ulterior motive. The straightforward narrative is, the demons are here! They're way too freaking powerful, but don't worry. The main character has the ability of main character and can activate his secret, special, awesome power of getting 10 times stronger. Yes, 10 times literally. This isn't the Dragon Ball style multiplier where, despite the numbers being accurate as far as how much stronger Goku got, it's not like it really made a massive difference as far as the battle scale. The scale didn't get noticeably bigger. It's not like solar systems were blowing up left and right. But yeah, he got a big freaking multiplier. Meliodas got a 10-fold power-up, and it felt like a 10-fold power-up. That was the straightforward reasoning for the training arc going in. Goes in, pops out, way stronger. Of course, let's not forget this is necessary, and he needs a training arc. He can't just all of a sudden be way stronger unless there's a time skip, which can be utilized brilliantly, thank you, One Piece. Not that I would really consider that a training arc, but of course it's the ulterior motive that really made this 7 Deadly Sins arc one of my favorite, if not my favorite, short training arc of all time. If you aren't aware, Meliodas' training regimen was all about groping Elizabeth for 8 hours straight. Oh shit, my bad, that was the plot of season 1. Yeah, his training wasn't to gain strength, but instead it was a growth required in his ability to harness his immense power. His 10-fold power-up was there. The question is he deserving to get it? And of course, a test was required. His training arc was to see if he can control himself and not succumb to his one inherent weakness, wrath. As the sin of wrath, that's his most powerful attribute that needs tending to. Despite the fact that throughout the series, for the most part, he's maintaining a complacent composure, you know, when he isn't destroying countries and stuff. But despite all that, his name until this point is Wrath. And now we understand why more than ever. And while the depths of his backstory weren't really explained in the anime of yet, this definitely, in my opinion, was one of the greatest introductions to a story I've seen in a while. Sometime in recent history, Meliodas' lover died in his hands, and it was the most heart-wrenching thing anyone can even imagine to experience. Of course, living through that, getting a little pissy is an understatement as to the emotional hold upon Meliodas' heart. So, at that point in time, when his lover loses her life in his hands, his wrath consumed him, and he wound up accidentally wiping out a country. This power was sealed, and the only way for him to prove himself worthy of getting it back was that we don't really want to worry if he gets a mental breakdown all of a sudden, kablooey, we lose the country. That's bad. So his test is for him to relive the last few days of his old life. First, a substantial amount of time while she's alive and well, and then when he reaches the pinnacle of happiness in this delusioned world, he experiences the crushing futility of her death in his arms, where his rage would consume him again and again until he can eventually break the cycle, thereby revealing that he is worthy of reclaiming his immense sealed power and he can control his wrath. And that's exactly the simulation he went through, hundreds and hundreds of times. Every single one of them, he was consumed by this wrath, thereby not being worthy as of yet to reclaim his power, but he persevered. He knew this was their only hope, wading through the infinite internal suffering, watching the life of his love coming to an end again and again and again. This in itself is one of the greatest fashions to experience a main character's backstory, and how much it means to him to this very day. How behind Meliodas' jovial facade, he's walking along in constant anguish. And of course, aside from his past that we're firsthand experiencing, we're also witnessing his drive for the future, willing to put himself through the ultimate torment for a shot at possibly saving everyone. That's not the best part of this training arc, though. That alone is enough to make it one of my favorites of all time, but it goes way further. Originally, the plan was to desensitize him to emotional pain. If he experiences it enough, to the point that it just doesn't hurt him anymore, that nothing hurts him anymore, he will have full control over his power and he will not lose to wrath. The idea was, if he experiences ultimate pain for an infinite amount of time, eventually his heart will start throbbing less than it was until this point. The fact that it didn't throb any less is an incredible point as far as his character's growth, and as far as to what his past means to him. But what's even more impressive, at least to me, is his alternate solution to the massive predicament they were in. A solution of philosophical value that I've actually considered at one point making an entire video on. He didn't overcome this pain, he didn't push it aside and power forward without losing himself himself to rage, he went the opposite route. He embraced his pain and he embraced his memories. He allowed the full emotional impact of the situation to hit his heart directly and squarely, instead of setting up the numerous subconscious barriers every single one of us has within. The truth of the matter is that he witnessed what reality was for the first time, and how no amount of wrath can change that fact. Yes, it's the saddest thing experienceable. Yes, it's a pain that will never go away no matter how much you try to push it out, but it's your pain. And subconscious mental blocks are not the way to overcome it, as the foreground of your mind attempts to blur the line between reality and imagination. Grieving gets one past the hurdle a lot more peacefully than dwelling on the situation. Meliodas finally woke up from his trance without suppressing anything. Not his wrath, not his sadness. He woke up embracing reality for what it truly holds and taking in every aspect of his past into his heart. He woke up with tears streaming down his face, fully accepting his cruel reality with an open mind and an open heart. That's why this training arc doesn't feel dry despite not being a training setting. Because while on paper this is definitely a training arc of the highest magnitude, and it was an accessory to exist in order for his power boost to take place, it solidified in my mind why Meliodas is one of my favorite shonen protagonists ever. To see the full hot take of that opinion, I did a whole analysis on the guy, so it's there. This is how a training arc should be used to make your protagonist overpowered once again. This may be a training arc on paper, but that does not negate how properly we've delved into the psyche of our protagonist's mind. How a character we thought we understood turned out to be just like an ogre with layers. And most of all, this is prime character development right here. More impressively than understanding more about a character or seeing how a character changes over time due to their past experiences, yet still, despite all that, maintaining the same moral integrity and philosophical outlook on life, in these 2 episodes, Meliodas evolved as far as a deeper character. That's why I understand far more about him, but also he evolved philosophically in a fashion rare to find anywhere, especially in the shonen setting. No matter the grievances that befall a person and how tragic they truly are, there's nothing that we have that's more valuable than reality. Going into this series, I did not honestly expect to find any philosophical value in a group of vibrant, overdog, badass knights having a great time taking back their kingdom from the demon dude. But this is how an overpowered power boost needs to be bestowed on the protagonist, focusing a lot more on the psychological than even the physical. And that's how to make a usually boring, bland, blunt, borderline blah but necessary training arc brilliant, with a developmental ulterior motive that changes one's perception of the character in training for the entire narrative. Yeah, it's a training arc. Yeah, it was used to get the guy way stronger than he was before. But the second method to make a training arc really amazing is for the ulterior motive of development or whatever it may be end up far more valuable than the actual 4 hours of treadmill running. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I'm sorry if splitting this up into 2 videos was not a good idea. Feel free to subscribe and leave a like. Also, click the tab on screen to get to how My Hero Academia handles training and why it's completely different than the 7 Deadly Sins. Enjoy.